You wake in a chamber that breathes like a beast. The curtains are nailed shut, every window sealed with wax and wool, as if the world outside carries plague in its breath. Braziers glow in the corners, feeding the room a heat that clings to your skin like guilt. Rosemary is stuffed into every crack, bundles of it, twisted and dry, a charm against something no one will name. They tell you this is safety. They tell you this is love. But if safety is warmth, why does it feel like drowning? Your body is a corridor now, a passage for a kingdom's future, a vessel they speak of in whispers and prayers. Your face is a shrine others kneel to, but your lungs are beginning to beg. The air grows thick, syrup-slow, heavy with the smell of iron and beeswax. Candles sweat along the walls. Their flames do not flicker, they shudder like something trapped. They call this mercy. Lying in, the sealing of windows against wicked air and whispered rumor, a ritual older than memory, blessed by physicians who never breathe what you breathe. You are royal, you are holy, you are alone. And somewhere beneath the embroidered sheets, beneath the weight of tradition and the fever beginning to crawl up your spine, your body knows what your mind cannot yet speak. This room was not built to protect you. It was built to prepare you. For what? The braziers hiss. The rosemary cannot mask it now, the scent of something small, patient, and hungry. Not outside the walls, inside them, inside you. Your heart begins to drum, not with life, with rhythm, the kingdom's rhythm, a pulse they will count, measure, and eventually inherit. You close your eyes, the room leans closer. And in the silence between one breath and the next, you begin to understand. Power does not need to kill you with blades or poison. It only needs to convince you that the cage is a cradle, that suffocation is devotion, that the heat stealing your breath is love keeping you warm. The curtains do not move, the door does not open. But something is already inside. The lying in reveals itself slowly, like a trap dressed as a throne. Protection, they call it. Protection by accumulation. More warmth for a womb they whisper is too cold. More witnesses to certify that what comes from you is real, is royal, is theirs. More linens, white, endless, folded with the precision of prayer, to mask fear with the appearance of purity. Gossips circle the bed like a crown of whispering shadows. Noblewomen float through in waves, bringing legitimacy with their breath and scandal with their eyes. They watch, they wait, they certify. A priest lingers just beyond the door, rosary in hand, waiting for a cry he can bless into prophecy. Bowls of water sit in the corners, their surfaces clouding with dust and time. White sheets parade in and out, carried by hands that have folded everything else in this palace, secrets, ambitions, the dead. Charms and relics nestle beside oil-slick cords on a table no one questions. A rabbit's foot, a saint's bone, a vial of something holy or at least expensive. The room becomes a theater where power performs tenderness. You are hidden to be holy, surrounded to be certain. Every face that enters is a signature on an invisible contract, every presence a notary to the kingdom's future. They do not come for you, they come for what you carry. And in coming, they bring themselves, their breath, their hands, their assurance that this is how it has always been done. But every presence is a step, every step a touch, every touch a risk that no one names. The nest begins to harden. What felt like warmth now feels like weight. The walls do not protect, they contain. The witnesses do not comfort, they crowd. You are the center of a ceremony that forgets you are still breathing, still feeling, still afraid. The candles gutter low. Wax pools on silver like small white graves. And in the hush between one visitor's departure and the next arrival, a question forms in the stale air. If the night cannot enter through the window, by which door will it walk in? The answer is already inside. It has been inside since the first curtain was nailed, since the first well-meaning hand smoothed the first blessed sheet across your skin. The air knows, your lungs know. But no one is listening to either. They feared miasma, poisoned air that slithered through cracks like sin through a saint's confession, so they crippled the wind. The chamber keeps heat like a feverish lung. Breath is breathed again and again and again until it goes heavy, then sweet, then wrong. Rosemary baptizes nothing. It only perfumes the rot it cannot stop. Curtains fall like velvet coffins over the walls, sealing you inside a mercy no one questions. The logic is elegant. The logic is fatal. If the air is wicked, still it. If warmth is good, add more. If one brazier is safe, 3 must be sacred. But stillness is not purity. Stillness is only stillness. And stillness without cleansing comforts what does not need an invitation. The scent of bodies doing holy work becomes a fog you cannot leave. Sweat mingles with incense, oil with exertion. The musk of women who have not seen sunlight in days, who carry the same air on their skin that you breathe into your chest. Your tongue goes dry in a room overflowing with water bowls that are never emptied, only refilled, their surfaces filmed with dust that no one sees. You call it safety because everyone else does. You call it tradition because it has a name older than your grandmother's grandmother. But stillness without cleanliness is not a sanctuary. It is a cradle, and not for the child they are waiting for. The room begins to lean, not with movement, with presence. Something patient, something small, something that thrives in the warm, wet dark where breath cannot escape and light cannot enter. It does not announce itself. It does not need to. It simply waits. And when the body is tired, when the skin is torn, when the borders between inside and outside blur in blood and effort, it crosses. Not through the window, not through the door. Through certainty, through care, through the hands that everyone trusts. That lean becomes a touch. And the touch becomes everything. Hands are the first theology. The midwife's fingers have held life and death in the same hour, on the same sheets. The attendant's palms carry latches, skirts, rosaries, another woman's tears. Rings press into soft flesh during each examination, leaving small round marks no one thinks to question. Oils gleam on their skin, mercy in a bottle, history beneath a sheen. In this age, clean means linen that looks white, not skin stripped of yesterday's dead. It means appearance. It means ritual. It means the same basin, the same cloth, the same blessed hands moving from one body to the next without pause, without soap, without the knowledge that something invisible rides between them. Torn tissues open a door inside you. Every examination is a threshold crossed. Every kindness, every careful touch becomes a bridge. Threads, cords, reused cloths blessed by a priest who has never washed them. Each small mercy is a carrier, each gesture of care a passage. The truth wears no cape. It does not arrive with fangs or prophecy. Streptococci, bacteria without poetry, riding in on certainty and habit, on hands that have delivered 100 children and buried half as many mothers. No one sees it. No one could. The enemy is smaller than sight, older than suspicion, patient as stone. You do not see the crossing. You feel its afterimage. A chill in a warm room, a sweetness at the back of your throat that turns slowly to something else. A scent you cannot place, floral, then feral, then wrong. The ritual kept out strangers, but familiarity turned the key. Touch becomes the language of betrayal, not malice, ignorance dressed as devotion. The midwife does not know she is the door. The attendants do not know they are the wind. The noblewomen do not know their breath carries what the nailed windows were meant to keep out. The body is a house, and each visitor leaves a footprint. No one looks at the mud. No one washes between rooms. And so the night walks in on the hands that were supposed to save you, wearing the face of everything you were taught to trust. The fever begins as a whisper, but whispers in stillness grow loud. Your pulse is a census. Your contractions, a treaty signed under curtains that will never open. Each spasm counted, each breath measured, each moment witnessed by eyes that do not see you. They see succession, legitimacy, the future of a kingdom balanced on the edge of your exhausted body. The crowd inside your sanctuary is not just kindness, it is policy. Witnesses tamp down rumor before it can breathe. Noble eyes certify bloodlines, ensuring no whisper of substitution, no shadow of doubt can crawl between the child and the crown. A priest's presence, if not his hand, assures heaven has a seat at the cradle, that God himself is a notary to this suffering. Privacy is preached as modesty for you, legitimacy for them. You are hidden to be holy, surrounded to be sure. The air grows heavier with intention. Each breath you take is shared by a dozen others, each watching, each waiting, each carrying their own agenda wrapped in silk and concern. The bed becomes a council table you are fastened to, not by chains, but by love and duty, which bind tighter than any iron. You swallow the arithmetic without choosing to. More reverence, more risk. More honor, more hazard. More candles mean more heat. More witnesses mean more breath stolen from air that will not move. More care means more hands, and every hand is a door you cannot see being opened inside you. The palace waits outside like a predator disguised as family. A child's cry will silence factions, unite rivals, cement alliances that have teetered for years on the question of your womb. Your silence, however, your failure, your death, will feed them for generations. Wars have started on less. Kingdoms have split over the shape of a stillborn's fingers, the timing of a mother's last breath. So you must survive, not for yourself. That luxury was spent the moment you were married into dynasty. You must survive because your survival is infrastructure. Your body is not your own. It is treaty and throne, cradle and crown, the inkwell from which the future will be written. In the hush between spasms, you picture it, a corridor of whispering candles stretching into a future you will not see, a ledger of names not yet chosen, alliances not yet formed, wars not yet waged, all waiting to be born from between your legs. The sheets beneath you are already stained, not with blood alone, with expectation, with the weight of centuries that have turned women into bridges and called it sacred. That ledger bleeds through the linen, through your skin, into the red dark place where something is trying to live and something else is learning how to kill. The room does not know which will win, but it has made its bets. Before scholars came with belts of tools and Latin, there were hands that learned by watching. Midwives inherited maps of bone and breath from women who inherited them from women who had no choice but to know. They brewed teas that softened hips, taught bodies to lean with gravity instead of fighting it, stitched tears with thread and patience and prayers no priest would recognize. They knew the angle of a shoulder lodged wrong, the silence that meant a cord had wrapped too tight, the color of water that promised life or warned of death. Gossip sang a wall around pain, voices rising in rhythm to drown the scream, to make the room feel less like a tomb and more like a chorus. Wet nurses waited on the far side of a cry, ready to take what the mother's body could not give. Their wisdom was not scripture, it was scar and lullaby. But when outcomes soured, those same hands became suspects. Which if the child died? Saint if it lived? The midwife carried both accusations in her bag, alongside the herbs and the knives and the certainty that she would be blamed for what she could not control. Then came the learned. Sometimes rare in the birth room, forbidden by modesty and tradition. Sometimes ruling it, speaking of humors and heat, prescribing more fire for cold wombs, diagnosing without touching or touching without seeing. They brought confidence that did not ask to be clean. They brought forceps that tore what they meant to save. They brought the weight of universities, of books written by men who had never bled, who had never felt a body try to split itself in two and still keep breathing. Status multiplied like candles in the room. The basin, however, did not. Clean meant a look, not a practice. It meant white linen and good intentions. It meant hands that had delivered a duchess were assumed blessed, even if those same hands had just come from the mortuary, from another mother who did not survive the mercy they provided. Between women's courage and men's certainty, a third force reigned: custom. Blind and proud, justified by repetition, sanctified by age. Custom said the room must be sealed. Custom said the air must be still. Custom said more witnesses meant more safety, more heat meant more life, more care meant more hands. Custom did not count the invisible passengers those hands carried. Custom did not ask why the fever always came after the kindness. From this rope of care and power, woven from desperation, tradition, ignorance dressed as wisdom, a thread begins to pull. And what it pulls is creed. In sorrow shalt thou bring forth children. The verse lowers like a net, catching everything it can name and letting the rest pass through unseen. If pain is ordained, then to challenge it is to challenge God. If blood is destiny, scrutiny becomes impiety. If suffering is scripture, then to ask why is to doubt the author. The creed is older than medicine, deeper than diagnosis. It wraps itself around every scream, every fever, every mother who does not wake, and calls it divine will. Churching promises purification after birth, as if the act of creating life leaves a stain rather than a light. As if the body that has just performed a miracle must be cleansed before it can enter holy space again. The ritual does not ask what killed her. It asks when she can be forgiven for surviving. The creed absolves those who will not look down, at the bowls that are never emptied, at the floorboards slick with fluid no one will name, at the hands that move from body to body without pause or soap or question. When a mother dies, Providence is praised for calling her home. Her suffering was her ticket, her death a promotion. The room exhales in relief disguised as mourning, and someone whispers that God needed another angel, as if heaven runs on the currency of young women's corpses. When she lives, obedience gets the credit, her submission, her faith, her willingness to endure what was always going to be endured. Suffering is not examined, it is interpreted. And interpretation is softer than change, kinder than accountability, easier than washing your hands. You feel the weight of centuries press a palm over your mouth, not violently, gently, the way a mother quiets a child who is asking the wrong questions. The theology of sorrow baptizes weak practices and crowns them as reverence. It turns negligence into piety, ignorance into humility, death into destiny. The fever kneels with everyone else in this room. It bows its head. It folds its hands. It waits for the prayers to finish, for the charms to be placed, for the heat to thicken and the air to stop, and the body to open just enough for it to slip inside. And then it drinks. Not quickly. Time is a luxury the fever has and you do not. It drinks slowly, methodically, feeding on the warmth they gave you, the stillness they prescribed, the hands they trusted, the creed they will not question. The body writes a verdict 1 hour at a time. But the room is already rehearsing its excuses. Day 2, a tremor dressed as humility. Your teeth sing against one another like stones grinding in a river. The sound is small but persistent, a rhythm you cannot control. Chills arrive beneath blankets that smell of honeyed smoke and old prayers. You tell yourself it is nothing. The body is simply adjusting. The body is simply tired, but the tremor knows better. Day 3, heat wraps you in velvet with teeth. It is soft at first, almost comforting until you realize it is consuming you from within. The milk rises and with it comes a scent, sweet at first like overripe fruit, then sour like something left too long in summer sun. Milk fever, they say with practiced certainty, and they close the windows tighter. The air thickens. You are sealed inside your own burning. Day 4, tenderness blooms in your belly, a dark flower that begs not to be touched. Every breath presses against something raw and spreading. Your thoughts begin to snag on the edges of the room. Conversations drift away mid-sentence. Faces blur at their borders. The bassinet seems farther away than it should be, as if the space between you and your child is stretching, thinning, becoming impassable. Day 5. Your pulse runs toward a cliff you cannot see. It races ahead, frantic, leaving you behind in this body that no longer obeys. The infant's cry becomes a rope you cannot hold, slipping through fingers that have lost their strength. You reach but cannot grasp. You listen but cannot answer. Sometimes mercy passes through by accident and carries you back from that cliff's edge. More often it does not. The cradle creaks like a small boat adrift on dark water. The bed tilts beneath you as if the room itself is capsizing. Candles sink into stubs, their light growing dimmer, more distant. Time becomes a strange fog, hours stretch and collapse, days fold into one another. This is not curse or star. This is not divine punishment or celestial misalignment. This is a timetable written in flesh, a calendar of collapse as predictable as seasons. But to name it truly would be to examine it. To examine it would be to bear responsibility. And so they call it milk fever. They call it God's will. They call it anything but what it is. Misnaming becomes a lullaby for those who cannot bear the true refrain. The mothers know the song by heart, even as it sings them to sleep forever. And from this calendar of suffering, faces begin to emerge, queens whose crowns could not bribe the fever, whose thrones became only elevated deathbeds. You hear their names and you think you know them. Queens, mothers of heirs, women draped in velvet and myth. But strip away the crowns, the coronation hymns, the oil pressed into their foreheads by trembling bishops, and what remains is this: 4 women in 4 different rooms bleeding into the same silence. Elizabeth of York, February 1503. The Tower of London is cold enough to crack stone. She holds her daughter, a girl born too soon, too small, and the room smells of iron and sweat and something older, something the midwives won't name. Days pass. Her breath folds in on itself. The bells ring, but they pretend they are not tolling for her. They pretend it is ceremony. It is not. It is ending. Jane Seymour, October 1537. England finally has its son. The infant is swaddled, displayed, paraded before God and court. The churchmen rehearse their thanksgiving. But in the Queen's chamber she is slipping. Not dramatically, not with screams, just slipping like water through cupped hands. Fever. Infection. The kind that crawls from the womb outward, turning the body into a furnace it cannot escape. Catherine Parr, September 1548. She survived a king. She outlived Henry, outlasted his paranoia, his rage, his slow collapse into rot. And then, free, remarried, finally allowed the marriage bed she was too valuable to risk before she gives birth. A daughter. But the body, long delayed, does not forgive the wait. Milk fever, they whisper, as if abundance itself could burn her from the inside, as if nourishment were the blade. Elizabeth of Valois, October 1568. She is 23, silk and youth and a future that glittered like cut glass. Queen of Spain, mother twice over, and then fever, no music, no ceremony, just fever creeping through her like smoke through a corridor. The miscarriage comes first. The infection follows. The room is sealed. The windows shut. The prayers warm and certain and useless. Different courts, different centuries, the same chamber. Sealed windows, warm prayers, hands that do not wash. Their deaths are not anecdotes. They are not footnotes in the biographies of kings. They are coordinates on a map of our refusal, a refusal to see what was always visible, always preventable, always chosen. The throne could command armies. It could summon fleets, rewrite religions, reshape borders with a signature. But it could not command a basin. We do not list them to sensationalize. We list them to recognize a pattern that spares no rank, no title, no amount of gold thread woven into a birthing gown. Their echoes widen the room until every mother is inside it. And the pattern, this terrible repeating pattern, points to a simple, blasphemous possibility that the cure was always there, within reach, ordinary, humble. A bowl, soap, water. The kind of humility that kings could not imagine. The kind that saves. Imagine a ritual made not of prayer, but of water and surrender. Rings stripped from fingers before the threshold is crossed. Nails scraped clean of yesterday's dead, the skin beneath them, the dust, the invisible filth we carry like inheritance. Hands scrubbed until the soap stings, until pride itself begins to bleed away. Linen boiled, not just laundered, not blessed and folded but scalded, made honest by heat. Instruments, the blade, the cord cutter, the tools that enter the body scalded too, not polished for display, not blessed by a bishop's hand, burned clean by water that does not negotiate. Visitors thinned to silence. The parade of witnesses, the courtiers who must confirm the air, the priests who hover like crows sent away. Let the room breathe. Windows open to the honest wind, not sealed against the night air as if cold were the enemy. The enemy was never the cold. It was the warmth of rot, the closeness of bodies that carried death like perfume. In another century, a man will stand in a hospital and beg his colleagues to do this. To wash, to scrub between patients, to treat their hands like weapons that must be sheathed in cleanliness before they touch another open wound, another laboring mother, another fragile throat of new life. His name was Ignaz Semmelweis. He will force a hospital to kneel before a basin, and deaths will fall, like leaves after frost, sudden and undeniable. And they will mock him. They will call him obsessive, insulting, a man who dares suggest that doctors, educated men, men of science and status, carry death on their hands. He will be driven mad by their refusal, beaten, committed, murdered by the indifference of men who could not bear the knife of humility. But the hero is not the man. The hero is the humility, a knife that cuts through custom, through the layers of reverence we mistake for care. The sacrament that mattered was never rosemary scattered on the floor. It was never the sealed curtains, the incense, the holy water sprinkled at the bedpost. It was the renunciation of the right to touch without question. Theology can bless, theology can blind. But only washing can wash. The room you needed, the room that could have saved Elizabeth, Jane, Catherine, Elizabeth, and 10,000 mothers whose names we will never know, was simple, and therefore unthinkable. To those who measured reverence by layers, by ceremony, by the weight of tradition pressed onto a woman's body like a shroud, simplicity was heresy. A basin is not grand. A basin does not flatter the hand that uses it. A basin asks you to kneel. And kings do not kneel. Physicians do not kneel. The learned, the anointed, the men who carry the future in their words, they do not kneel before water. But water does not care. It cleanses or it does not. It saves or it does not. And from this bowl, this humble, blasphemous bowl, the final movement rises. The window opens. The blessing is rewritten. Not over corpses, over bodies that live, over language that finally tells the truth, over the rooms we build around love and the ones we must burn to save it. Word count 560. Dawn unlatches the air. A basin sits beside a cradle, two small oceans deciding a life. The old words loosen in the throat. You feel them dissolve like salt in clean water. Unclean becomes postpartum, a medical fact, a temporary state, not a curse, not a stain on the soul. Milk fever floats away from divine punishment and lands where it belongs. Infection, preventable, treatable, named. God's will makes room not for blasphemy but for responsibility, for the terrifying, liberating truth that some suffering is not fate. It is choice. It is neglect dressed as reverence. Foucault spoke of power as performance, and he was right. The birthing chamber was a stage. The velvet curtains, the procession of witnesses, the prayers spoken loud enough to drown out screaming, it was all theater. Bodies were not sacred. They were sets where fear rehearsed cruelty in the costume of care. We replace devotion as heat with devotion as cleanliness. We replace legitimacy as crowd with legitimacy as care. You leave the chamber not by walking through a door, but by changing your hands. Wash them. Scrub them until the skin is raw and honest. Thin the witnesses. Let only those who serve the body remain, not those who serve the spectacle. Open the breath. Crack the window. Let the air move like it was meant to, like lungs were meant to, like life itself. Let the midwife rule the room. Let her voice be the loudest. Let her hands be the final authority. And let the priest wait outside. Not banished, not scorned, but waiting until his blessing can land on a living woman, not a dying one. Tradition is a fine cloak, soft, heavy, warm, until you realize it conceals a knife. Strip it. Not all of it. Keep the warmth that comforts. Keep the songs that soothe. Keep the touch that says you are not alone. But discard the warmth that rots, the closeness that suffocates, the custom that kills because no one dared question it. The nightmare slows into a vow you make, standing at the edge of this long, dark corridor we have walked together. Never mistake comfort for care. Never mistake ritual for love. Never let the weight of tradition become heavier than the weight of a newborn chest, rising and falling, fighting to keep breathing. May every room that labors for life let the wind in first. May the hands that touch be clean, not because cleanliness is holy, but because it is effective. May language serve the living, not the dead. May we stop whispering when we should be shouting, stop blessing when we should be washing, stop performing when we should be saving. The final image is this: water in a basin, rippling with morning light. A child breathing, steady, soft, unburdened by the sins we invented and the cures we refused. And a queen, any mother, every mother, watching through open eyes. The eyes we kept closed too long. The eyes that are finally, blessedly awake.